Hello, I have just read chapter 2 of Coruscant Knight's Jedi Twilight. First off, sorry for not uploading a review yesterday. I the day I had uploaded my first review of the book of chapter 1. Um, the night that day it was just completely whack. I did not get any sleep, and I didn't dare to read the second chapter that day because I was already getting quite tired, and I knew if I read it, would not be able to focus on the chapter. And then the night did not get any sleep at all, and even though I did wake up, I didn't dare read it then because I knew I'd probably start getting tired again and wouldn't be able to focus. So I just waited until I got until I finally did get to sleep, which was around about 3 p.m. or 3 p.m. or so, 2 p.m. or so yesterday. And I woke up about 3 hours ago. It's 8 a.m. now, almost half 8. So yeah. That's roughly about the exact time I woke up actually. Anyway, well, I got up at least. So yeah. Anyway, on to what I thought of chapter 2 of this book. It was quite interesting, and again, it was focused on Nick Rostu. Nick, again, from what I remember of Shadows of Mindor, was actually quite a good character. It was a little bit humorous. He was a very grounded character. He felt very grounded and realistic in the madness that was that book. Um, and it's nice to kind of see that he does seem a bit grounded in the madness that's going on here. Um, I think I'm not quite getting that as much as I was in Mindor, and again, I haven't read Shatterpoint. I know that's his first book. I haven't read that, and I think this does reference Shatterpoint, as it does bring up um events from what it does bring up some things that I assume are from Shatterpoint. The most of the chapter is just catching us up with what he's been up to since Shatterpoint. It does bring up that Mace fought Carvasta, who I know Carvasta's the main villain of that book, I think. So yeah, and I learned some stuff about that book. Apparently, Nick Rostu almost had his organs fall out of him after I assume Nick Rostu hit him with one of his shields. So poor Nick. Um, but yeah, this was quite a nice chapter. Again, it was mainly just catching us up with Nick, telling us what he's been up to since Shatterpoint. We're told that he had his own division, the 44th Division. I think it was like Rostu's Renegades. What's it called? I don't remember. Where is it? Yeah, I'm not going to try and find it. It'll take too long. But yeah, he had his own division, which included clones and other species. And we're told about how he was given a choice when the Empire rose, whether to join them or be shot down, and he decided to instead jump out the window, shot down the Empire representative and the two troopers that flanked the representative, and the rest of the troopers in the room tried to shoot down Nick, but he jumped through a window which was 260 floors high, but 10 meters below was like some sort of rubbish truck going by or something, and and his connection to the Force told him that. We're told about how he helped helped protect the merchants, and how they were part of a new revolutionary group who were trying to take down the Empire. It very much sounds like it could have been in Last of the Jedi, because that book series really did focus a lot. Did really did make a big point out of resistance groups at the time. So this really could have fit in with Last of the Jedi. I know this was published quite a few years after Last of the Jedi. So I'm actually going to be quite interesting. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to be interested to see if there's any references to Last of the Jedi in here. I don't think we were going to have any name drops or anything, and I don't think the Erased are going to get mentioned or anything like that. But, it'll be interesting to see if, anything from those books will get brought up, because again, they were published before this book, or at least when this book was coming out. When was Coruscant published? I think it, from what I remember, wasn't it written in like 2006, and then was published quite a few years later. Okay, it was published in 2008. I know it has some crossovers with Evasive Action, which I have read. I read it a couple of years back. I'm not personally keen on that series. I think the first two stories are good, the other two not so much. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how if there's going to be any connections. Anyway, and so Emma Carr told about how Nick was kind of just hoping to settle down at this point and relax after fighting a war. Now he's finding himself fighting the Empire. We've also talked about when he was in the Clone Wars, about how his group was kind of viewed as how his little division was distinguished, and the heroes and stuff. But to him, how it was just days and nights of screaming chaos. So yeah, there's lots of This is quite a nice chapter, but it is just mainly just catching us up with what Nick's been up to, and then the chapter when we get to about the final 3 pages. I think it's at like the end of the third to last page of the chapter. We're caught up with all that, and we get back to the story, and Nick and the other group and the group he's with now are hiding as 6 stormtroopers go by. And Nick overhears them talking about a Jedi. And so they decide to follow them, and they find the place Evan P was hiding in. And they watch the troopers go in, and Nick says that they should follow them, and one of them says that what was the character's name? Cars Corthos. That make Is there any was his name somewhat inspired by Kirkanos? That's interesting. I just realised that sounds similar. Anyway, Cars Corthos says that maybe they should not. That maybe. What does he say? I'm trying to remember. He says, Nick says, "Let's go." Nick whispered. Could be they've got a Jedi trapped in there. Could be we'll be. Could be we'll be in the fix. Could be we'll be in the same fix if we don't do some recon before we rush in. And we're told about how Carl's Corthos is quite a bit nervous, but his instincts are really wrong. And Nick considers it and decides to agree that they probably and starts thinking about it, that they probably should do some reconnaissance to scout out what their entries and escapes could be. And then they hear blasts of fire and they decide to go in. And that's where we end the chapter. Yeah, this was quite a good chapter. Again, it is just mainly catching us up with what Nick's been up to. We get to learn a little bit. Again, I haven't read Shatterpoint, but I do know he had connections with Mace Windu, and it's nice to kind of see how they had a bit of a friendship going on. Of course, he didn't see him very often as the war went on, but still. And it also tells about how he knew quite a lot of Jedi during his time as a major in the Republic, and how he was under the impression all Jedi Council members are dead. Though, of course, we know here that he's about to meet Evan Peel, who is on the Jedi Council. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Going to be very, very interesting to see how this goes. Yeah. I don't really have a whole lot to say in this chapter, really. It's nice to kind of see, how Nick thinks. We told about how he was. Again, I haven't read Shatterpoint, so this was a lot big. This was kind of like learning more about Nick's history, which isn't really brought up in Mindor. But we learn a bit more about how Horan Kai or something like that. About how they're mainly in how it kind of just has always lived a life of war and was hoping for some peace now that the war was over. Um, we also learn about how he has little patience for for talk of the afterlife, and that he doesn't want to start all over again, and he's already lived a life that's already pretty difficult. And we learn a little bit more of his thoughts on things and how he feels and stuff. So yeah, it was quite a good chapter for getting into Nick's head and learning more about how he thinks, and it definitely still feels like this is the same Nick from Mindor again. I know I probably should be bringing up Shatterpoint in here because that's where he was first from. I've not read Shatterpoint, so I can't comment on that. All I know is that Nick's in there, Carnivas is in there, Mace Windu's in there. That's all I know about that book, and that it's on some sort of forest planet, and there are the Harun Kai and the Oshos or something like that. That's all I know about that book, so I'm not really going to comment on it because I'm not, I don't know enough about that book to make any references or comments to it. But yeah, it was quite nice to just see Nick again, and I knew he was going to be in this book going forward. I mean, in this book going into it, sorry. And so yeah, I would kind of like to see him be a bit more Nicky, if that makes sense. Again, the thing is with Nick, at least in Mindor, he felt very grounded in a very wild situation. But also, this isn't a madness situation. And I think that's kind of why I think, and that might have been one of the reasons I really enjoyed Nick in that book. It was such a wild, ridiculous, over the top book, Mindor. And Nick just felt like he just was really grounded in all of that madness, and it just let him be a bit more comic relief in that book because he's the one guy who is very grounded and realistic and actually settle down in that book. Whereas here, this is a more serious story. Not that Mindor wasn't a serious story. This definitely has a lot more of a serious, darker, gritty feel to it. And that's more like suiting what Nick's character feels like he's come from. And so, he's the less funny, more grounded and serious here. It's good, but also we didn't talk a lot in this chapter either because we're just being caught up with him. Yeah, I do not have a whole lot to say on this chapter. Overall, I'll say these first two chapters, they're good, but they could be quite a bit better. It could be quite a bit better. You still don't really have an idea of where this is going. There are about 40 or so chapters in this book, but still, it's we're two chapters in, and I only know what the plot of the book is because I've read the summary on the back. So yeah, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't have anything else to say on this book, on these first two chapters, obviously, because it just isn't a whole lot to say. It's just catching us up with Nick and getting Evan Peel into a situation. So yeah, I think that'll bring the end of this review. I don't know if I'll put this up with another chapter review. It depends on how many I read this today, and if I read another or not. I don't know if I will. But yeah. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.